Have you ever woken up on a quiet morning, looked around the same room you have known for years, glanced at the career you have built, the home you have worked for, the stability you thought would bring peace, and suddenly felt a strange emptiness? A question rises like a whisper from deep inside. Is this really the meaning of my life? That whisper can be unsettling. It can follow you from the breakfast table to the office, from the car ride home to the late hours of the night when you stare at the ceiling and wonder why fulfillment has slipped through your fingers. Carl Jung knew this voice well, not because it was unique to any one individual, but because he saw it echo in the lives of countless patients who came to him in their middle years. He recognized that something unusual tends to stir between the ages of 35 and 45. Outwardly, many people at this stage appear to have everything society tells them to pursue: career success, financial security, family, reputation. Yet beneath the polished surface lies a gnawing sense that these achievements do not answer the deepest questions of the soul. Jung understood that what modern culture often labels as midlife crisis is not merely stress, nor is it simple exhaustion. It is the beginning of a profound inner turning point. Imagine a businessman, perhaps in his early 40s. He has climbed the corporate ladder, owns a large house, and drives an expensive car. Colleagues admire him. His family depends on him. Outwardly, he is the picture of success. Yet each night, when he returns home, he sits in silence with a drink in his hand and feels hollow. The triumphs of the day, the deals won, the bonuses earned, none of it fills the void. He tells himself he should be grateful, but gratitude alone does not silence the whisper that asks, "What is the point?" Or imagine a mother who has poured every ounce of her being into raising her children. For years, her days were full of purpose, preparing meals, guiding homework, managing the rhythms of a busy household. Now, as her children grow independent, she finds herself alone in the kitchen, staring at a quiet table. The role that once defined her has dissolved. She feels invisible. She wonders who she is without the daily demands of motherhood. Jung listened to people like these. He noticed that their experiences were not isolated, nor were they simply signs of fatigue. He saw a pattern. At midlife, the structures of identity built in the first half of life, career, family, social roles, begin to lose their power to satisfy. The psyche demands something deeper. Jung described this as the soul's summons, a call to leave behind the outer pursuit of status and possessions and to embark on the inner journey toward meaning. He warned that if this call is ignored, the emptiness grows louder. People may chase distractions, new cars, affairs, compulsive work, excessive drinking, in an attempt to drown out the voice within. But these diversions rarely bring peace. Instead, they widen the gap between who a person appears to be and who they truly are. Jung observed that this dissonance can lead to depression, anxiety, or destructive choices if left unacknowledged. Yet he also insisted that within this discomfort lies immense potential. Midlife crisis, Jung believed, is not a disaster, but a threshold. It is the psyche's way of demanding growth beyond the ambitions of youth. The first half of life is often dedicated to building, securing work, establishing relationships, carving out a place in society. The second half asks a different question. What is the meaning of all this? Who am I beyond the roles I play? For Jung, to face these questions honestly is to enter the process he called individuation, the unfolding of the deeper self that exists beyond masks and social expectations. It can feel terrifying, this invitation to step away from the familiar. To a businessman, admitting that wealth no longer satisfies may sound like betrayal of everything he has worked for. To a mother, Confessing that life feels empty when her children leave may sound like ingratitude. But Jung reminded us that the psyche does not condemn, it calls. The void is not punishment. It is a space being cleared for something new to be born. Think of it as standing at a bridge. Behind you lies the first half of life, with its battles for recognition and survival. Ahead of you lies an unknown landscape shrouded in mist. The bridge feels narrow. To step forward requires courage because the destination cannot be seen. Yet Jung believed that those who cross discover a richness beyond anything society promises. They find the self, an inner wholeness that gives meaning not just to success or failure, but to existence itself. And so, when you hear that whisper on a quiet morning, asking if this is all there is, know that you are not alone. You are standing where countless others have stood, on the edge of the same threshold. Jung called this moment not a crisis of despair, but the soul's invitation to awaken. This is why he often referred to midlife crisis as a golden hour. It is the precise moment when the old illusions collapse and the possibility of authentic living appears. Painful though it may be, it is an extraordinary gift. As we move forward, we will step deeper into the story of how outer success can fail the soul, and why Jung saw this failure not as the end of meaning, but as the beginning of transformation. The polished image of success often hides a quiet ache. Picture once more the businessman who has spent decades climbing the ladder, building his career, securing a reputation. He walks into boardrooms where his name carries weight. He shakes hands that seal million-dollar deals. He receives applause at conferences for his sharp strategies. Outwardly, it looks like he has reached the peak of the mountain. Yet when the lights dim and he is alone, there is a strange silence inside him. The applause fades quickly. The deals signed lose their glow, and the mountain he has climbed feels empty at the summit. Carl Jung paid careful attention to this paradox. Again and again, he encountered patients whose outer lives seemed enviable, but whose inner lives were crumbling. These were men who could buy anything they wanted, yet confessed to lying awake at night, wondering why life felt meaningless. They had fulfilled every external demand, providing for their families, gaining prestige in their industries, becoming the embodiment of ambition, and still they carried a gnawing sense of hollowness. Jung saw that this was not failure but inevitability. The psyche eventually demands more than status and money. The businessman, in Jung's case, studies might have been admired by his peers, but inside he was restless. He might secretly envy the simplicity of a child playing in the street, or the authenticity of an artist painting for no reward but joy. The polished suits and titles could not protect him from the truth that success without meaning is barren. Jung understood that such hollowness is not weakness. It is the signal that the soul is ready to move to a new stage. For some, this restlessness expresses itself as dissatisfaction at work. The projects that once excited them now feel lifeless. Promotions no longer bring joy. Meetings seem like rituals stripped of spirit. For others, it shows up as irritability or withdrawal. A successful man may find himself snapping at his family without knowing why. He may feel an inexplicable longing for something. He does not know what, only that it cannot be purchased. Jung believed that when outer success fails to nourish, it is because the individual has mistaken the mask for the self. The mask, what he called the persona, is the role one plays in society. The successful executive, the respected leader, the provider. It is useful, even necessary, but it is not the totality of who we are. When the persona is mistaken for the whole self, the deeper layers of the psyche rebel. They create tension, dreams, even symptoms, all to remind the individual that he is more than his role. This is why so many successful people encounter sudden feelings of emptiness. Their lives have been built around a role that has outlived its purpose. The businessman may begin to wonder, who am I if I am not the CEO, the strategist, the wealthy man in the corner office? These questions are frightening because they threaten the foundation on which his life has been built. Yet Jung insisted that these very questions are the beginning of wisdom. Consider the metaphor of a house. In the first half of life, we labor to build it. Walls, roof, doors, windows. By midlife, the house stands strong, admired by others. Yet one day, you walk inside and realize that though the house looks impressive, it feels empty. The rooms are furnished but lifeless. The walls are decorated but cold. Something essential is missing. The house is not a home because the soul has not been invited in. This is the moment when outer success reveals its limits and the search for inner meaning begins. Many resist this realization. They double down on work, take on bigger projects, or indulge in extravagance to drown out the ache. Some chase novelty, fast cars, new relationships, exotic vacations, hoping excitement will silence the void. But as Jung observed, these attempts rarely succeed. The void remains, whispering more insistently. He saw this not as failure, but as evidence that the self refuses to be ignored. When outer success fails the soul, the challenge is not to abandon life's achievements, but to place them in perspective. Jung never condemned ambition or responsibility. He simply warned that these cannot be the sole source of meaning. At midlife, the task is not to destroy what has been built, but to expand it, to integrate inner purpose with outer life, to let the soul breathe through the structures of success. This is why Jung spoke of individuation as a journey that begins in earnest at midlife. It is the process of reconciling the persona with the deeper self. The businessman who listens to his emptiness may discover a passion for mentoring, or a longing for creativity, or a spiritual hunger that no promotion can satisfy. If he follows that call, his success may take on a new dimension, not measured in wealth or applause, but in authenticity and wholeness. So, when outer success begins to feel hollow, Jung invites us not to panic, but to pay attention. The emptiness is not a curse. It is a summons. It is the soul's way of saying, the role you have played has been important, but now it is time to discover who you truly are. This realization opens naturally into another story, that of the mother whose life has been defined by her children and who now finds herself at the same threshold of emptiness. Her journey, too, reveals how the call of the soul arrives when outer roles no longer suffice. In another corner of life, far from the boardrooms and corporate ladders, a different story unfolds with equal weight. It is the story of a mother whose entire being has been poured into raising her children. From the moment they were born, her days were full of structure and meaning, feeding them, guiding them through their first steps, teaching them to read, driving them to school, cheering at their games, staying awake at night when they were sick. Her life was not her own, and yet, for many years, she did not mind. In fact, she found in motherhood a deep sense of purpose, a reason to rise every morning. But then, as children do, they grow. They leave home for college, or they start families of their own, or they simply no longer require her constant care. The kitchen that once rang with voices now feels silent. The rooms are tidy, but the stillness echoes with absence. She stands at the stove preparing a meal, only to realize no one is there to eat it. She picks up her phone to call one of her children, then hesitates. reminded that they are busy, independent, living lives of their own. What once filled her with identity has slipped away. Carl Jung observed this pattern in many women who came to him in their middle years. He understood that what was happening was more than empty nest syndrome. It was the same call of the soul he saw in men who had achieved success yet felt hollow. For the devoted mother, the role of caregiver, the persona she inhabited, had defined her so completely that when it faded, she was left staring into a mirror that no longer reflected who she was. The grief of this realization can be overwhelming. She may feel unneeded, invisible, or forgotten. Some respond by clinging, calling their children constantly, offering help even when it is not asked for, trying to recapture the role that gave them meaning. Others spiral into depression, feeling that their life's purpose has ended. Yet Jung would gently remind them, what has ended is not life itself, but a chapter. The soul is whispering once again, insisting that identity cannot rest only in roles, however noble. The maternal archetype, Jung explained, is powerful and sacred, but it is not the totality of the self. A woman is not only mother, she is also a soul with dreams, creativity, longings, and hidden depths. When children leave, the psyche creates space for those neglected parts to emerge. This transition is painful because it strips away the familiar, but it also carries extraordinary potential. Think of it as standing at a crossroads. One road points backward, toward clinging to the past, trying to force life into the shape it once had. The other road points forward, into uncharted territory, asking her to discover who she is beyond motherhood. At first, the forward road looks frightening. It is misty, uncertain. But within that mist lies freedom, the chance to rediscover her own voice, her own passions, her own soul. Jung believed that dreams often serve as guides in such times. He noted that mothers in transition frequently dream of children in danger, or of losing them, or of searching desperately for them. These dreams are not warnings of literal harm, but symbolic images of the psyche's struggle with letting go. They dramatize the fear of losing identity. Yet, if understood correctly, they also point to the need for rebirth. The child who must now be cared for is the inner child, the neglected self that has waited patiently for attention. The pain of the empty nest, then, is not an enemy, but an invitation. It is the psyche saying, now is the moment to turn inward, to nurture the self with the same devotion once given to others. For some women, this may mean rediscovering creativity, painting, writing, music. For others, it may mean engaging in community, travel, or spiritual exploration. Jung insisted that such pursuits are not selfish. They are essential. They are the natural continuation of life's journey toward individuation, the unfolding of the true self beyond roles. The businessman who feels hollow and the mother who feels lost are not living separate stories. They are both encountering the same threshold in different forms. Jung saw clearly that midlife crisis does not discriminate between men and women, between professional and domestic life. Wherever one has built identity, the psyche eventually asks, is this all? What lies beyond? And so, the mother's story leads us back to Jung's central insight, that midlife is not a time of collapse, but of transition. It is the moment when outer roles dissolve just enough to reveal the inner call. It is painful, yes, but also sacred. As we continue, we step into Jung's vision of this crisis not as decline, but as the golden hour of the soul, a chance for transformation more profound than any success of the first half of life. Carl Jung often spoke of midlife as a turning point, but he did not describe it in the bleak language of decline. Instead, he called it the golden hour of the soul. To him, What appears as collapse is actually the moment when the deeper self begins to press against the walls of the life we have constructed. He saw this not as tragedy, but as invitation, an opening to move beyond the persona, the mask worn for society, and to step into the vast, uncharted territory of individuation. Why golden? Because it is rare, luminous, and fleeting. Just as the hour of twilight glows with a beauty unmatched by noon or midnight, so too does midlife contain a unique brilliance. The first half of life is about building outward, establishing a career, raising a family, gathering possessions, creating a place in the world. These pursuits are necessary and natural. But at some point, the soul begins to whisper that the outward climb is not enough. This whisper often arrives as emptiness, as unease, or as longing. For Jung, the moment we listen to this whisper is the moment the golden hour begins. He observed that many people resist it fiercely. They tell themselves they are simply tired, that they need a vacation, that once the children finish school or once they get the next promotion, everything will feel better. But Jung noticed that the symptoms often persist, even intensify. He recognized that these were not surface-level problems, but the psyche's way of forcing attention inward. The golden hour is not easy. It demands surrender. It strips away illusions. It asks us to admit that the stories we have told ourselves, I will be fulfilled when I earn this amount, when my children succeed, when others admire me, have reached their limit. Jung did not see this as failure, but as nature's design. Just as the body changes at midlife, so too does the psyche. A new season begins. He compared this transition to the sun moving across the sky. In the morning, life is about rising, achieving, conquering, securing. By noon, the sun is at its peak, representing the height of worldly success. But eventually, the sun begins its descent. Many fear this descent, mistaking it for decline. Yet Jung insisted it is not decline but ripening. The afternoon of life holds its own purpose, just as vital as the morning. To resist it is to remain trapped in illusions. To accept it is to enter wisdom. In this golden hour, individuals are invited to meet parts of themselves long neglected. The businessman who has lived for wealth may discover a longing for art, music, or service. The mother who has lived for her children may rediscover her creativity, her dreams, her voice. Jung described this as the call to individuation, the process of integrating all aspects of the psyche into a greater whole. The shadow, the anima or animus, the self, all press forward in midlife, seeking balance. For those who embrace it, the golden hour becomes transformative. They begin to ask deeper questions. What brings me alive? What truth have I ignored? What does my soul desire? These questions are not answered in a day. They unfold slowly, often through reflection, through dreams, through struggles that force honesty. But Jung believed that facing them is the very essence of maturity. The golden hour can be frightening because it dismantles old certainties. Yet Jung reassured his patients that the fear itself is a sign they are on the right path. Growth always feels uncertain. The caterpillar does not know it will become a butterfly. It only knows it must enter the cocoon. So too, the individual entering midlife crisis does not know what lies ahead, only that the old patterns no longer suffice. This is why Jung urged us not to treat midlife as a problem to be solved, but as a mystery to be lived. He encouraged patience, trust, and courage. He saw the golden hour as a sacred threshold, a chance to shed false identities and awaken to the true self. As we move forward, We will look more closely at the hidden signs of this transformation, the subtle signals by which the psyche announces that the golden hour has arrived, even before we consciously recognize it. The golden hour of the soul does not always announce itself with thunder or lightning. More often, it arrives quietly, through small disturbances in daily life, subtle signals that something within is shifting. Carl Jung paid great attention to these signs, for he understood that the psyche rarely speaks directly. Instead, it whispers through moods, symbols, and patterns that, if ignored, grow louder until they cannot be denied. One of the first signs is restlessness. A man or woman may look at the life they have built and feel an inexplicable dissatisfaction. The job that once felt rewarding now seems tedious. The routines that once provided stability now feel suffocating. Even pleasures that used to delight may suddenly feel empty. It is as if the soul has turned down the volume on everything familiar, leaving silence in its wake. Jung saw this restlessness not as ingratitude, but as the psyche preparing for a new stage of growth. Another sign is the rise of anxiety or irritability. A successful executive may find himself snapping at colleagues, though he cannot explain why. A mother may feel uneasy during quiet afternoons, sensing that she has lost her bearings. These emotional disturbances are the psyche's way of signaling that something deeper is unsettled. Jung believed that symptoms of this kind are not merely pathological, they are meaningful. They are messages in disguise, demanding attention. Dreams, too, often shift during this period. Jung devoted much of his work to dream analysis, and he noticed that midlife dreams frequently involve themes of death, loss, or journeys into unknown places. A person might dream of wandering through a deserted house, or of burying a child, or of being chased by shadowy figures. Though frightening, such dreams are not predictions of doom. They symbolize the death of old roles, the loss of outdated identities, and the need to confront hidden aspects of the psyche. To Jung, these dreams were invitations to deeper self-understanding. Physical symptoms can also appear. Fatigue that no doctor can explain, changes in appetite, sleeplessness, all may reflect the strain of an inner conflict. The body, Jung believed, participates in the psyche's struggle. When meaning is absent, the body often carries the burden. He urged his patients not to dismiss such ailments as mere inconvenience, but to ask what the soul might be saying through them. Relationships often reveal the signs as well. Long-standing marriages may feel strained, not necessarily because love has vanished, but because both partners are changing in ways they do not yet understand. Friendships may fade, while new and unexpected connections arise. Jung noted that as the psyche seeks wholeness, it often draws people into our lives who reflect the parts of ourselves we have neglected. A restless husband may suddenly be captivated by an artistic friend, not because he truly wishes to abandon his family, but because that friend mirrors his own unexpressed creativity. Beneath all these signs lies a common thread. The psyche is calling for balance. The persona, the outward mask, has grown too rigid, too narrow. The deeper self presses against its confines, asking to be acknowledged. If ignored, these signs may escalate into crisis. If honored, they open the path to individuation. Jung warned that modern culture often misinterprets these signals. We treat restlessness as a need for distraction, anxiety as a disorder to medicate, dreams as meaningless. But he believed that when we dismiss these experiences, we cut ourselves off from the very guidance we need. The psyche speaks through discomfort because it cannot reach us otherwise. The challenge is to listen, to pause and ask, what is this restlessness trying to show me? What truth does this dream contain? What part of myself have I neglected? These questions can feel daunting, but Jung assured his patients that they mark the beginning of transformation. Recognizing the hidden signs is only the first step. The next step is facing what those signs point to: the shadow, the denied fears, the unacknowledged desires, the forgotten potentials. To walk into midlife fully, one must confront the shadow, and through that confrontation, find renewal. The whispers of restlessness, the unease of dreams, the cracks in outer life, all of them, Jung taught, point toward a deeper encounter waiting in the shadows. For him, the shadow was not merely a metaphor for darkness. It was the living reservoir of everything we have pushed aside, denied, or refused to admit about ourselves. And at midlife, when the persona begins to falter, the shadow often rises to the surface. The shadow is not evil by nature. It contains both what we fear and what we long for, what we condemn and what we secretly admire. Imagine a businessman who has always valued logic, order, and control. In his shadow may live the neglected artist, the child who once loved to draw or write poetry, but was told it was impractical. Or picture a mother who has always been selfless, endlessly giving. In her shadow may dwell the woman who longs to say no, to claim her own freedom, to live for herself. The shadow holds these suppressed truths, and at midlife, they demand to be seen. Jung observed that the shadow often enters life indirectly. It may appear in irritations with others, the colleague we cannot stand, the neighbor we constantly criticize, the public figure who provokes us beyond reason. Jung would say, look closely. Very often, the traits we despise in others reflect unacknowledged parts of ourselves. A man who ridicules dreamers may be denying his own longing to dream. A woman who condemns selfishness may be terrified of admitting her own desires. In this way, the shadow forces recognition through projection. But projection is only the beginning. The true work of midlife is to withdraw these projections and claim them as our own. This is painful. It requires admitting that the qualities we have condemned or ignored are part of us. It requires humility to see that we are not only the persona we have polished for decades, but also the rejected aspects we tried to hide. Jung called this integration, and he believed it was essential to individuation. For many, the confrontation with the shadow feels like death. The businessman who sees that his obsession with control has suffocated his creativity may feel his identity unraveling. The mother who admits her anger at being taken for granted may fear she is betraying the image of the good mother. Yet Jung would insist that these moments are not destructive. They are the beginnings of authenticity. To integrate the shadow is to reclaim wholeness. This does not mean indulging every hidden desire or acting out every suppressed impulse. Rather, it means acknowledging them, giving them space in consciousness, understanding their role. A man may not quit his job to become a painter, but he may allow creativity into his life in new ways. A mother may not abandon her family, but she may finally speak her needs and pursue passions of her own. By integrating these shadow elements, the individual moves closer to balance. Jung also emphasized the role of dreams in this process. The shadow frequently appears in dream imagery: dark figures, threatening strangers, animals lurking in the night. At first, these images terrify, but Jung urged his patients to see them as guides. The frightening stranger is not always an enemy. It may be the neglected part of the self demanding recognition. By listening to these symbols, the individual learns to converse with the shadow instead of fleeing from it. The integration of shadow is not only personal, but collective. Many midlife struggles reflect cultural shadows as well. A society that worships youth projects its fear of aging onto the middle-aged. A culture that prizes achievement despises idleness, making restlessness feel shameful. Jung warned that unless individuals face their shadows, these projections shape communities, fueling prejudice and division. Thus, shadow work at midlife is not just personal healing. It contributes to collective balance. The journey is arduous, but those who embrace it often describe a profound sense of liberation. They feel more authentic, less bound by masks. They discover compassion for themselves and others, knowing that everyone carries a shadow. And they begin to glimpse the larger self, the wholeness that waits beyond duality. Midlife crisis, then, is not merely the collapse of meaning, but the chance to reclaim the exiled parts of the soul. By walking through the shadow, one discovers renewal. And this renewal leads naturally to the deeper task Jung described: individuation, the unfolding of the true self that lies beyond masks and shadows alike. When the shadows have been faced, when the restless signs have been acknowledged, something begins to stir that Jung considered the true task of midlife: individuation. This is not a term meant for academic discussion only. It is a lived experience, a journey toward becoming whole. Individuation is the process by which a person moves beyond roles, beyond masks, beyond the fragmented self, and begins to embody the deeper self that has been waiting all along. Jung described individuation as a kind of rebirth. In the first half of life, energy flows outward. We are busy constructing education, career, family, identity. We build a structure to survive in the world. By midlife, that structure stands solid, but the soul knocks on its walls, demanding more. Individuation begins when we stop asking, "How can I achieve more?" and begin asking, "Who am I really? What is my life for?" The answer does not come in a single flash. It unfolds slowly, through dialogue with the unconscious, through confrontation with the shadow, through openness to symbols and dreams. Jung often guided his patients to notice recurring images: a river, a mountain, a child, an animal, that appeared in their dreams or fantasies. He taught them to treat these not as random illusions, but as messages from the psyche. Each symbol carried a piece of the self calling to be integrated. For the businessman who felt empty, individuation might mean rediscovering the part of himself that longs to create, to mentor, to live with authenticity rather than image. For the mother who felt lost, it might mean reclaiming her individuality, exploring passions she put aside, realizing she is more than the role of caregiver. Individuation does not erase past roles. It deepens them. The businessman may still lead, the mother may still nurture, but now they do so with awareness of their whole being. Jung often said that individuation is like a pilgrimage. It is not about reaching a final destination, but about traveling inward, step by step, layer by layer. Along the way, we encounter archetypes: the hero, the wise old man, the anima or animus, that reflect universal patterns in the psyche. By recognizing these figures, we see that our struggles are not only personal, but also collective. The businessman's longing for authenticity echoes the archetype of the seeker. The mother's grief at her children's independence resonates with the archetype of the great mother in transformation. Through individuation, personal suffering becomes connected to the deeper story of humanity. One of Jung's profound insights was that individuation is not selfish. It is not abandoning responsibilities in pursuit of personal desire. Rather, it is aligning one's life with the deeper truth of the soul. When individuals become more authentic, they contribute more genuinely to those around them. The businessman who reconnects with creativity may inspire his company in new ways. The mother who embraces her individuality may model wholeness for her children. Individuation ripples outward. Still, the journey is not easy. It requires patience, courage, and humility. It means letting go of illusions, accepting imperfection, embracing paradox. Jung warned that individuation often feels like walking in darkness before the dawn. But he also promised that those who endure discover a light not dependent on external success. They discover meaning that cannot be taken away by age, loss, or failure. This is why Jung called midlife crisis a golden moment. Not because it is painless, but because it offers the chance to awaken to the self. It is the hour when the persona falls away and the deeper truth shines through. To reach this point is to realize that midlife is not decline but transformation. And so we return to where we began. The businessman staring at his empty glass, the mother looking at her quiet kitchen. Their journeys are not stories of collapse, but of initiation. They stand on the threshold of individuation, poised to step into a life of authenticity, depth, and wholeness. Midlife may feel like a breakdown, but Jung invites us to see it as breakthrough. It is the sacred threshold where illusions die so that the self may be born. And as the sun sets on the first half of life, a new dawn begins within, the dawn of the soul's true calling. As we close this journey, we return to Jung's central insight. The midlife crisis is not a curse, but a calling. It is not merely stress, exhaustion, or the loss of youth. It is the golden hour of the soul, a moment when life itself insists that we awaken. To those who feel empty despite success, to those who feel lost when their roles dissolve, Jung whispers across time, "Nothing is wrong with you. You are exactly where you are meant to be." The void you feel is not punishment, but preparation. It is the clearing of space so that a deeper self may emerge. This threshold is sacred because it invites reconciliation with the shadow, with forgotten dreams, with neglected truths. It asks us to integrate what we have denied, to face what we have feared, and to claim the fullness of who we are. Yes, it hurts. Yes, it feels uncertain. But within that uncertainty lies the seed of authenticity. Picture again the image of a sunset. The light fades, shadows lengthen, and it feels as though the day is ending. Yet Jung reminds us, the same horizon that swallows the sun at dusk is the horizon from which dawn will rise. Midlife is that horizon. It looks like an ending, but it conceals a beginning. If you find yourself in this place, remember, you are not alone. Millions have stood where you stand, feeling the same emptiness, asking the same questions. And many discovered that what they thought was collapse was actually rebirth. They stepped through the crisis and emerged with a life more authentic, more compassionate, more whole. Jung believed that this is the great gift of midlife, to awaken to meaning that cannot be bought, to discover a self that cannot be lost, to live a life that belongs to you in the deepest sense. The crisis is not the end of the sentence. It is the comma, the pause before the story deepens. So if your soul whispers, listen. If your dreams disturb, attend. If your restlessness unsettles you, honor it. These are not enemies. They are invitations. They are the golden signs that the second half of your life is ready to begin. Carl Jung left us with this enduring truth. Midlife is not decline, but transformation. It is not the fading of light, but the rising of an inner sun. The hoarse cry of emptiness is, in truth, the first breath of awakening. And as you step across this threshold, know that the pages ahead are waiting to be written, not with borrowed roles, but with the voice of your true self. Because the midlife crisis is not the end. It is the moment your soul begins to live its own story.